Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. The slogan, press on, has solved and always will solve the problems of the human race.
Welcome to the BoldBrush Show, where we believe that fortune favors the bold brush. My name is Laura Orengo-Bear, and I'm your host. For those of you who are new to the podcast, we are a podcast that covers art marketing techniques and all sorts of business tips specifically to help artists learn to better sell their work. We interview artists at all stages of their careers, as well as others who are in careers tied to the art world in order to hear their advice and insights. On this episode, we're joined by Australian portrait painter Vicki Sullivan. We discuss how she began her path as an artist thanks to the support of her grandmother, some excellent advice for anyone looking to become a portrait painter who takes on commissions, and she reminds us of the importance of persisting and continuing on your path with determination and spirit. We also talk about why it's important to seek out good business advice from professions outside of the arts, and to remember that even though some people won't like your work, there are others who will. Finally, Vicki tells us all about her brand new instructional video, Painting Realistic Portraits, available now on Streamline. Welcome, Vicki, to the BoldBrush Show. How are you today?
I'm very well. All the better for seeing you, Laura.
Yeah,
Again.
Yes.
It's
We were
lovely.
just saying it's been 7 years since we last saw each other, so I'm so excited to be able to catch up with you and ask you things about your career that I think when we first met, I couldn't even know what to ask. You know, how like what do I even ask someone who's doing amazing in their career so that I can learn from them. Right now I can do that, which is so great.
Well, I love listening to your podcast and hearing all the other artists and how they proceed. And you learn a lot, don't you, from everybody else and different ways of approaching things.
Yes, and that's
So,
also why I'm excited to interview you because you have your own way of approaching things that we were just talking about before we started recording. And I'm so excited because the way that you approach things is very much more how I would want to approach things, and maybe some of our listeners as well, so that, they know that there are different ways of getting around, I guess, the typical things that maybe some artists have to do, and you can basically do whatever fits with you, right?
yeah.
But before we dive into that, do you mind telling us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm an Australian painter. I work in a realistic method. I'm academically trained. I trained at the Angel Academy and I did study here in Australia as well with a couple of different teachers, Brian Armstrong and Fiona Bilbrough. And I studied tonal painting here before I went to the Angel Academy in Florence, where I met you. Excuse me. And I mainly paint figurative paintings. I do a lot of portrait commissions, but I also do still life, so you can see some of my still life paintings in the background.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've been curious to ask you about is, before the painting, right? Before you decided, okay, I'm going to study at these schools, what were you doing? Did you have like a different career and then you decided to jump into painting, or were you able to just dive into painting right away?
Well, when I went to art school, um, painting, the sort of painting that we do, realistic painting, was really discouraged. So I went off to art school for a couple of years and I really did want to learn to paint, but it was very discouraged and I ended up losing my mojo and becoming a potter. And then I went from there to painting on silk and making clothing and scarves and selling them in galleries and at markets. And I did that for years and that basically paid our mortgage for years. But then I decided to follow my painting, and learn. And that was when I found out about the McClellan Guild of Artists, which is about an hour drive. And I went and the process of studying with my teachers here. And then I heard about the Florence Academy, and because I saved up, and my husband and I went overseas and traveled around, and I was in Venice, and I saw a figurative painting by Ramiro Sanchez from the Florence Academy. And I said to Michael, oh, I want to learn how to paint like that. Like that's what I want to be able to do. You know, I want to be able to do that. And there was nowhere in Australia except maybe the Julian Ashton, but it's not the same as the Florence Academy, you know. And I spoke to the woman who owned the gallery, and she said, oh yes, that's Ramiro Sanchez, and he studied at the Florence Academy. And I'm writing all this down and checked it out, and I looked at the prices and I thought, I'll never be able to afford that. And then I thought, but maybe I could just save up and just do a term, you know, at a time. And so I came home and I saved up for 3 years. And meanwhile, another artist said, well, how come you're going to the Florence Academy and not the Angel Academy? And I said, what Angel? I've never heard of the Angel Academy. And he goes, well, check it out, because I really like the alumni work there. And if I had the choice, I'd go there. And I had a look, and I thought that it was really high standard there as well. And so I decided to go to the Angel Academy instead of the Florence Academy. And I think it really suited me because it was a smaller school. And what I didn't realize before I went is that the Florence Academy teaches sight size, and I already knew sight size. I'd already learned that. But Angel Academy teaches comparative measuring as well, which is very useful to have both of those skills. So I was very glad that I had chosen that. And plus Maestro, you know, he was so great. We love Maestro. So, you know, and I just learned so much from going there and from studying with him, and all the teachers were really great. And because it was a smaller school, I think it suited my personality better. So that's how I ended up ending up and meeting you.
Yeah, our paths crossed. Yes. And it's so appropriate too that you ended up at Angel Academy too, because you know Maestro is, you know, he was at one point the highest paid portrait painter, I think in North America. So you know, it's very appropriate that now you're a portrait painter. You know, you do commissions, and you know, kind of following those footsteps as well. And I completely agree. You know, having both sight size and comparative measurement, you know, under your belt, super useful, because sight size can only take you so far. And I feel like with comparative measurement, it really, you know, gives you the next side of things that sight size can't really give you. So it's it's a great point. And then I wanted to ask you, did you always want to be an artist? Was this something that you ever since you were a little girl, you were like, I'm gonna do this?
Yeah. I was always drawing and painting, and my grandmother painted, and so she always encouraged us. Her philosophy was, if a child is interested in something, foster it. So she always made sure that we had things to draw and paint with. And you know, my brother was into woodwork and things, so, and her brother had a factory and used to get these amazing shaped bits of blocks of wood, so she was always bringing down bags of these amazing blocks of wood. And both of us kids, but especially Darren, would be out there banging away and making these creations with these blocks of wood. And he ended up being like a furniture maker. And
Oh my gosh.
and I ended up being a painter. So, you know, she was right into fostering what children are interested in, which is a good philosophy if you're going to have children,
Absolutely.
I think. Don't ever force the child into something they don't want to do. You know, encourage what they do love. I think it's a
Yeah,
really good
absolutely. Yeah, because I
thing.
think a lot of people, they seem to misunderstand. Like a lot of people think, okay, I'm preparing my child by making them do something they don't want to do. But it's like, well, if you let them, you know, learn to do the thing that they really enjoy, they can use that as like a
Yes,
motivator and as a refuge away from,
yes,
you know, when they, you know, they can do the things they don't want to do, but then they can recover themselves by doing the thing they enjoy. So it's very much a
yeah,
balance. So that's awesome. Wow. That's so
yeah,
great that your
yeah.
grandmother did that. That's so sweet.
I
I
know.
kind
I
of have
feel
that with my
lucky.
grandma. Yeah. Yeah. I kind of have that with my grandma, except it was knitting and cooking, which I still do. I love knitting. It's like my side hobby. But yeah,
Yes.
yeah. But yeah, it's and that goes to show too that when someone is really paying attention, right? They see like a child and are like, you know what, this child has these strengths. How can we encourage them? And then, and then it
Yeah.
turns out into, oh, there she is. She's making a living doing the thing that she'd always loved doing.
Yeah.
Which, that's really inspiring for people out there as well to hear because, there's that whole false narrative of the starving artist, which, as we know, it's not true.
Yeah.
Or I mean, for the majority or for most of the part, there are ways to make money as an artist. And you also mentioned how to supplement income, you were doing your pottery, you were doing the scarves, you were
Yeah.
doing everything in your power to be able to, you know, do the thing you
To
loved, and then
learn.
eventually,
Yeah.
yeah,
It
and
did
that
it
led to
did
where you
take
went.
me quite a few years to get to the point, like, for quite a few years there, everything I earned was going back into materials and
Mm.
lessons and things. It took quite a while for it to turn around and start paying me back. But
Yeah.
now it is. It seems to, touch wood, that it keeps going along like that. But at the moment, I sort of, I do get commissions coming in and enough to keep me going. And, I'm doing the still lives. And I've found a gallery in my local area and they're just wonderful, and they really like my work, and they seem to sell it quite well. And I found another gallery who want to try my work up near where my daughter lives, up in the country, which means that I can work that in with my lifestyle. I like it when my artwork can work in with my lifestyle, so I can go and visit my daughter, take some paintings up, see my granddaughter, and have that fitting in with my life, work it
Mm.
all in so that it works nicely.
Yeah, yeah, and see, that's the other great point. It's like people who pick this career, they do it because one, they absolutely love it, and two, there's something that maybe most of us don't like, working for someone else. We don't like
Yeah,
being told, "Oh, you have to do this and this and this, and you have 8 hours," and it just feels so limiting when, you just wanna be free and liberated. Of course, that comes with the responsibilities of, trying to supplement that income, but at the same time, it's a really great
yeah.
payoff.
Yeah, well, it is, and, I probably work harder for myself than I would if I was just in an ordinary job, but
Mhm.
the reward is worth that, for me, because I do love what I do, and you know what they say, if you work at what you love, you never have to work. So
Yeah,
even
that's what
though
they say.
you're not working, like if I had to go off and, I don't know, clean houses or something, it would be very hard to be motivated. Whereas I can't wait to get up in the morning and get into the studio and start painting. And, it's easy for me to self motivate because it's exciting for me. Whereas if I had to work for doing a job I didn't like, it would be so hard for me. I don't know how I'd motivate myself, really.
Yeah, yeah. And that brings up the other point of, whose life are you living, right? I mean, I understand that some people they do great working for someone else and that's fine, but I feel like for
Yeah.
most people who are artists, we really just and this is going to sound funny because it's a little bit selfish, but we want to live our lives for ourselves, we want to live our lives uh in tune with our own nature and with our own cycles and our own, way of doing things.
Yeah.
And like I was saying earlier, live your life for yourself, right? I don't want to live my life, putting in work for someone else's company, when oftentimes that someone else and their company couldn't care less about me. So I'd rather work for me because I care about me. And again, it gives you that time to spend time with your family, with your
Yeah.
grandchild, it's
And it's very rewarding, being a painter is a very rewarding thing to do, isn't it? When not always, I mean, sometimes when you're struggling with a painting, it might be sort of like, tear your hair out. But when it's working or when you achieve something that you're pleased with and you've made a leap, it's so rewarding, isn't it?
Yeah, and then
Mm.
I don't know if this happens to you where, like, you're done painting for the day and maybe you're holding, like, a cup of tea or, like, you're drinking something and you just walk over to your painting and you just look at it and you look at it and you look at it and you're like,
Yeah.
I like how I did that. Oh, but I gotta resolve this." There's just
Yeah.
something also fulfilling. It's like food for the mind to, like, problem solve and to
It's
put
food for the
things.
soul, I think.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. I make little notes, so I'll come down and have a look, and I'll make fix that edge, make that bluer. Usually, fix that ellipse. I have
Mhm.
a lot of trouble with ellipses and straight lines. Fix
Yeah.
that straight line. Things like that. So yeah, and then I blue tack it next to the painting so that the next day I've already figured out what I need to do, and I just can work through bit by bit
Yeah.
just to be
Yeah.
organized.
Yes, I'm of the same mind. I'm the type of person who, like, I really love taking notes also of my paintings. Like, okay, these are the colors I use, and then this is what I did. This is the medium. And then breaking it down. So, like, okay, today I'm gonna work on this part, and then tomorrow this part, and then the next day this part. Because I feel like I tend to get really lost in it's like I tend to jump around too much. So to get myself on track, it's very, very good to have a plan. Like, okay, no, we are not touching
Yeah,
any of this. We're just touching this today because if we do something else, it might ruin everything, and nothing's gonna get done. And that's also how I used to
yeah,
work at the academy too, or like an Angel. I used to whenever I was planning my casts. Yep, I would just know today is this, just this.
yeah, just that bit. Yeah, and get
Yes.
it right.
Exactly, yeah, and it's so fulfilling too to see it all slowly come together, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's wonderful. And speaking
Yeah,
of, because
lovely.
you have such lovely paintings, and you
Thank
truly
you.
are an inspiration to me. Your work was sent to the moon. What was that about?
Well, it tried to get there.
Oh.
It got to space, but the
Mhm.
thing was it was Moon Goddess, which I think you can see her behind me. Is she behind me? Oh, yes, up the top. That's called Moon Goddess. There were a few in the Lunar Codex, but I really wanted her to get to the moon because I wanted to have the first Moon Goddess on the moon.
Yeah.
But she took off, and I watched the launch, and it was so exciting. And watched the rocket take off, and it took off, but then it developed a fuel leak, so it orbited, and it orbited all the way around, and they couldn't get it to the moon because of the fuel leak, so it ended up crashing into the Pacific. But it did orbit the Earth and get to space, so we were among the first Australians and the first women to ever have their art in space. So that was something. So, but she didn't quite get to the moon. But Samuel Peralta, who's the amazing man behind the Lunar Codex, he is going to put everything that went down into the Pacific on another nano chip, a micro nano chip thing, and send it up in November in another launch. So it may get to the moon. But in the meanwhile, they did send another one up the other day, which my friend Jackie Grantford's work was on, and it got to the moon. So we had a little celebration lunch the other day. We said, well, now we're space cadets.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
so sweet.
So she's on the moon and I got the space. Yeah, and it's all to do with this amazing physicist called Dr. Samuel Peralta, and he got the idea over COVID to make um, a lunar codex, which is and put on it poetry and literature and art into a little micro nano fish and pay for it to go up to space and be interred in a time capsule on the moon so that in centuries to come, people could look back and see that humans, even though they were going through wars and plagues and climate emergency, they still took time to make beauty,
Yeah.
which is pretty interesting, isn't it? That,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, it's very
So,
poetic. Yeah.
yeah, he's a pretty incredible fellow, actually. So he must be very pleased that, you know, the second one actually landed. I was very
Yes.
pleased for his sake that it got there.
Yeah, and then hopefully that means that the next one will also land there and your work can join the other work in the moon, which is so cool.
And Moon Goddess will finally get to her destination.
Yes, where she's supposed to
Yeah.
be. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in terms of, selling your work, right? That's one of the things that most people really want to know, especially people who want to become living artists. What do you find has been the most useful approach that you've taken to sell your work, both online and offline?
Well, I think that the most useful thing is to be persistent with social media. I must admit, I have sold quite a bit through online sales, whether it's social media or there's a few different online venues. And I think you really need to be constantly putting your work out there, something every day, whether it's just something little or whatever. You have to be persistent. You can't just be once a week or something, maybe a few times a week. But as long as you are persistent in keeping it so that people are seeing it, because you can be the most fantastic painter ever, but if you never put your work out there for people to see, nobody's going to know about your beautiful work and where to buy it. So the main thing is you've got to get it in front of people's noses so that they can actually see, And I think I had this lovely man who commissioned me to do his portrait a while ago, and he gave me this little saying about persistence. And can I get? I'll
Yeah,
just
go for
grab
it.
it. It's just over here, and I'll read it to you. Okay, so refuse to accept failure. He sent me this. He's a lovely man. Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. The slogan, press on, has solved and always will solve the problems of the human race. And so he was 84 when he commissioned me to paint him. And we've stayed friends ever since. It must have been about 10 years ago, I think, or more. And he sent me this little thing, which he framed, and I have it in my studio to make me realize, because sometimes when, you put your work in shows and you don't get accepted, and there's a whole lot of, what's that syndrome? Imposter syndrome, and the whole thing that you mentally go through. I read this about persistence, refuse to accept failure. So just press on and don't give up and be persistent. I think that's the best advice that I've had. And so, when it comes to your art, you have to do the work, but you have to also learn about these new platforms, about social media and putting it out in front of people and entering shows, entering competitions, anywhere that can get your work in front of people. I think
Absolutely.
I think that would be my best advice. So just keep at it and, just be persistent about it. Don't just do a whole lot and then forget about it. You have to kind of do a little bit, do a little bit. Have I done a little bit today? And, sometimes I listen to podcasts about art and, well, podcasts like yours and, try and learn how other people do things
Yeah.
and just try and add to your knowledge about, oh, that sounds interesting. Maybe I'll try that, or, try different things and, be flexible, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I really like that, the quote about persistence, it's so true. We truly have persisted, in the standpoint of evolution as well. And
Yeah.
today, it is very important to persist, especially, in the face of, gosh, feeling like you're in front of this, juggernaut of something that's pushing against you, right? I feel like it definitely is human nature to really press on. So it's wonderful that you try to keep that in mind, especially with your work, because it is true. Being an artist means facing a lot of rejection from a lot of
Doesn't
directions.
it?
It does.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it has most of the time it has almost nothing to do with the painting itself, right? Sometimes, it's not the right time, the right person didn't see it.
Yeah.
And that's also why I love what you said about, really putting your work out there all the time, because you never know when those perfect eyes that are gonna want it are looking at that screen.
Exactly. Yeah, and the other thing, the other advice that I had was that not everybody's going to like your work. So find where they do like your work and put it in front of them. And so I sort of took that on because being in Australia, realism, I don't think, is very appreciated in the establishment much here. Whereas in America and Europe, it's much more appreciated and there's more scope for it. And so I sort of thought, I'm a bit over this. Like, I feel like I'm banging my head on a brick wall here. And I heard that and I thought, okay. So I started sort of entering my work overseas and I found that, and also Australia is a tiny little pond in a way, and it's kind of cliquey and there's a bit of an art scene. And, I'm not really in any arts, I'm sort of not in the scene. I'm not known. I don't live in the city, you know, I'm scared to drive in Melbourne. So, I'm sort of a country bumpkin. But if I put my work overseas, that's all taken out of the equation because nobody knows who I am, and my art is just taken on the value of what people might like over there. And also, so I'm careful about where I do enter it. So I enter it in things that appreciate realism, you know, because there is a lot of, you've got the Art Renewal Centre, you've got the Portrait Society of America, there's the bold brush, the plein air competitions, all of those, they really like realism. They really appreciate it. So I figure, well, that's where put my work there, put my work in front of those people. And that's actually worked for me, um, because here it just wasn't what is fashionable here, I suppose. And maybe that'll change because I think it has grown in America and Europe a lot. Again, there's a big resurgence in America. So it's quite big. I don't think that's quite happened here yet. I'm hoping it will. I mean,
Fingers
people
crossed.
do like the establishment. If you look at the portrait competitions here and everything, there's only really a few realist paintings that make it in. So I figure, well, don't try and be a big fish in a little pond. Be a little fish in a big pond, sort of.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely pushes you past the comfort zone, because you're faced with more of I guess comparison in a way, and also you're faced with other people who paint really really well, which of course there's room
Yeah.
for everyone. There's room for everyone. And like you were saying, it's just about sending it to the right place so the right people see it. um
Yeah.
and there's always someone. And again, back to that persistence, that's why it's so important to be persistent.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
at BoldBrush, we inspire artists to inspire the world, because creating art creates magic, and the world is currently in desperate need of magic. BoldBrush provides artists with free art marketing, creativity, and business ideas and information. This show is an example. We also offer written resources, articles, and a free monthly art contest open to all visual artists. We believe that fortune favors the bold brush, And if you believe that too, sign up completely free at boldbrushshow.com. That's BoldBrush show.com. The BoldBrush Show is sponsored by FASO. Now more than ever, it's crucial to have a website when you're an artist, especially if you want to be a professional in your career. Thankfully, with our special link, faso.com/podcast, you can make that come true and also get over 50% off your first year on your artist website. Yes, that's basically the price of 12 lattes in 1 year, which I think is a really great deal considering that you get sleek and beautiful website templates that are also mobile friendly, e commerce, print on demand in certain countries, as well as access to our marketing center that has our brand new art marketing calendar. And the art marketing calendar is something that you won't get with our competitor. The art marketing calendar gives you day by day, step by step guides on what you should be doing today, right now, in order to get your artwork out there and seen by the right eyes so that you can make more sales this year. So, if you want to change your life and actually meet your sales goal this year, then start now by going to our special link, faso.com/podcast. That's faso.com/podcast. Yeah. But speaking of, your collectors and your clients, you definitely, as a portrait painter, as someone who is commissioned to paint portraits, you need to have a good relationship with your clients and your collectors. How do you, can you describe how you maintain those relationships and build those relationships as well?
Well, usually people contact me through my website. So I have a page on my website about commissioning portraits, and people will usually email me first, and then I might email them back, and they'll ask a few questions, and I'll usually send them to the page because most of it's all written out, so I don't have to be answering every single person the same things every time. I figure it's really nice to have a lot of that information right there where they can read the whole process. And then usually we make a time for them to come to the studio, and mostly with commissions, because I'm quite a slow painter and I paint in layers. Nobody's got time to come and sit, not very often. So normally I just take a few hundred photos, and then we go through the photos together that I'm going to work from to find the ones that they like of themselves, because I want them to be happy with the look of, I might choose a painting and they'll think, oh, I don't like that face, or, I don't like my face like that. So I want them to be happy, and then I'll use that particular photo, and I usually get it print. I've got a really good printer, and I get it printed out, and just work from that photo, usually. And then I'll get them back to, I've got one over there. Oh, I don't think you can see it. I've got one over there that a lady, I just came and I invited her to come and see what she thought. And it was interesting because she said exactly what I said. I think the mouth needs to be a little bit happier, and, just tiny little incremental changes. And then I'll do those, and then that'll be finished. So, but I try and work with the client. I don't just sort of go, oh, this is how I want it, because they're commissioning me. So I want them to be really happy, and maybe go off and tell their friends, hey, I had a great experience, I'm really happy with what this lady did. And, um, and that's actually been really good, because quite often it'll be referrals from other people, and yeah, that's really nice. I've done a few university chancellors, and that's been nice because I did one university chancellor, and then the next chancellor got me to do theirs. So that was really good. And same with a couple of different school principals as well. So yeah. And there's, some people who come, and one lady gets me to paint all her grandchildren every time they turn 12. So every couple of years I've got she's got about 6 grandchildren. So, that's really nice too.
Hmm.
Um, and I just try and make them happy. If they're commissioning me to paint their portrait, I want them to go away feeling really happy about what I've done.
Yeah.
And that's why using a photo is kind of good, because they get to help choose which one they like.
Mm,
Yeah.
And then also, do you keep in touch with all of your past I guess portrait commissionees?
Not all of them. A lot of them I probably do. Um, I guess I guess I do. Trying to think. I do keep in touch with quite a few of them. Yeah, I do keep in touch with quite a few of them actually. Yeah, but not all of them.
Mm,
Some of them I do, and others I not so much. It depends on the rapport and if they want to keep connecting. And sometimes some people aren't on social media. It's kind of easy when people are on social media to kind of keep in touch a little bit more.
yeah. Yeah, that's a good
Yes.
point. And then do you find that they are usually like repeat collectors or
Well, with commissions, not so much, except for the lady with all the grandchildren. And the lady that came the other day, she commissioned me to paint her husband for his 70th, and
Oh,
then he's commissioned me to paint her for her 70th. So I guess there is a bit of repeat business happening there. Yeah, which is really
yeah.
nice. Um, and with the still life, I don't really know about this. If I'm selling it online, yes, there has been people that have bought several paintings, but when it's in the gallery, I actually don't get to know who bought it,
Mm,
which is kind of sad because
yeah.
I'd like to keep in touch, but so yeah, I don't really know who they are. Although I might hear, oh, they were locals, or they were from Sydney, or they were from Canada, or, I might hear something like that, but I don't really know who they are to keep in touch with. Although sometimes people will email me and say, oh, I bought one of your paintings and I want advice on the frame, or I don't know, or usually they're framed, or I don't know what they'll ask me, but they'll just get in touch and yeah,
Yeah,
something like that.
that's one of the downsides of working with a gallery is that they're not for some reason they're very I guess secretive about who buys the work. Which is kind of sad because I would also want to know, oh, who bought this painting. For one, it's like I hope it went to a good home, and second, I'd like to know where my paintings are, right? Especially if in the future, if you want to do like some sort of exhibition of your past works and you need to get these works back, it's good to know where they went so you can contact the collector and be like, hey, do you mind if we borrow this for an exhibition?
Yeah. Well, I guess if you're working with a gallery, you just have to accept that that's the usual thing, that you're not selling it directly. When you're selling it directly, you know where they've gone, but if otherwise you just don't know.
Yeah.
So that's just part of working with the gallery. I mean, I'm really grateful to be working with the gallery that I'm with. They're so fantastic to work with. Really nice people, and they love my work. And I think that's if you've got a gallery that loves your work, that's so much more likely to sell.
Yeah, because
Mm.
they're invested in it, not just, as a, oh, I'm just selling this. They're invested in it as in we are active supporters of this painter, this artist, and we want them to
Exactly.
thrive and we believe in their work, which is really important.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's so nice that they, I've had my work in galleries before, and they'll have so many artists, and you'll go in there and your paintings will be shoved in the back room or something.
Mhm.
And these guys aren't like that. They've got a few racks. They'll have a few pieces out and a few pieces on racks. But if people come in and mention it, they'll be pulling the racks out and showing, and everything's just really organized. And they only have a few artists. So they only have, I don't know, a dozen artists maybe, which is really nice. So everything's really curated, and it's not all crowded in. Um, and that so you're getting special attention, which is very nice.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's also that, like finding a gallery that really fits with your work as well. It's
Yeah.
I think these days it's really common to see galleries that have, I want to say, like 50 artists, and they might be representing them well, right? You also have to
Yeah.
like reach out to people, like if you can reach out to, like, artists who are represented by the gallery and ask them, hey, is this gallery, worth it?
Yeah.
Are they taking care of you? Then it's okay, right? But if it's a gallery that has like 50 to 100 artists and they're not selling or they're not really doing anything, then
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a good gallery to work with.
And also they've got to be looking after the work, because
Mm.
one friend of mine who's a sculptor, she had her work in a gallery and they lost several pieces for about 6 months. I think they had a couple of galleries and they weren't quite sure where they'd gone, and that would be not a good situation either.
That's really scary. Yeah, and I've also
So
heard of
really,
galleries. Yep, it's really, I mean, I've heard of galleries who sell work behind the artist's back and then they don't tell them and then they like run away. Which it has
wow.
happened, I think, in the past. I think in the past 5 years it happened to Jeremy Mann. He's still on the hunt for two of his missing paintings.
Ooh.
Yeah, the gallerist, she sold a bunch of stuff and then ran off with the money, and, I think Interpol was after her for a while. Not sure if they caught her, but yeah, it's, that's the other really scary part of, having maybe an overseas gallery, right? It's also very good to visit the gallery in person and then talk to
That's
the
true.
gallerist. Yeah, because it's a
Yeah.
big risk. It's a big risk.
Yeah, and also, as you said, to talk to other artists about their experience, and I was recommended by my neighbour, actually. He put me in touch with these guys, and it's called Curate Art and Design. It's in Sorrento in Australia, which is my hometown where I grew up. So it's really nice
Oh.
for me to have a really good, gallery in the town where I grew up. I just lived down the road from that town. Um, but it's really close to my heart, so
I love that. That is so cute. It's
yeah,
like little
yeah.
Vicky has been there, and then, of course, now it's Vicky who's the artist is there too, and I love that. That's so full circle, like your life has been in
Yeah,
this one
it's really
place.
good.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's so
So I
sweet.
think that galleries are great if you get the right gallery and the right people to work with, and I'm
Absolutely.
lucky that I found these guys, so yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. And then I
Mm.
wanted to ask you, for our listeners who maybe are considering becoming uh portrait painters, right, who take on commissions for portraiture. What do you recommend? Because, some of the things that maybe some artists might wonder is, how do I price my work, especially if you're just starting out? And then, what other factors do you personally consider when you are starting a portrait or you want to start a portrait commission?
Well, one of the things that I would recommend if you're painting portraits to get yourself known is to enter portrait competitions. I think that's a really good thing to do. And that's kind of how I started just doing portraits, was to start entering into portrait competitions. And but when I start portrait, well, basically I start with the photo session. So I get them to bring several outfits to wear and try some different poses, and then go through and see which ones they like, and then sometimes I'll get the right look on their face and I'll get the right pose, but there might be something like a foreshortened hand, or something, and I'll go, oh, let's do that photo again, but like turn the hand that way.
Mm,
And I had to do that recently with one because I realized that it's just it just wasn't going to really look so great with a foreshortened hand coming straight
mm.
at you, and yeah,
And it's huge.
yeah, and so I try and look through everything about that photo, because it's much easier to take the photo again than it is to try and get a hand from a different photo and Frankenstein it on there, I think.
Yeah.
You know, it's much easier to work with one good photo that fits. And I use an 85 mil lens on my camera so that it doesn't distort. And I get far enough back. So I've got an 8-meter studio. It's 8 meters by 8 meters. So I can get far enough back to get the full person in with that 85mm lens, because that's the thing. It doesn't go in and out with an 85. It just stays flat, but you don't get distortion.
Right.
So you don't get, big heads and small bodies or anything like that with them. So I use that. Take lots of photos so that you can, if you need to, then you can refer if something's not quite right in the photo that you've got, then you can refer. Or if you really need to, get them back to have another photo session. If there's something not quite right that you haven't got the information and you feel like you really need it, get them back for another photo. I've had to do that a few times. If they've got time, it's really nice to do a life study, a sketch, just to get the colour, I think. But I do have a really good printer now, so he's really great at doing the colour. So I'm pretty happy about his photography with the colour at the moment. And then the other thing, I guess, is the pose. And I always try and, have, say, the body going one way and the head going another, usually, just to, as remember Maestro used to say about the gracefulness of the pose. Try and get an S curve in there if you can in the pose, or a curve, so that you're not just like straight, boring straight pose. Try and think about the flow of the gesture of the pose when you're posing them. Crack a few jokes, because quite often people aren't used to doing a photo session and they'll freeze up, and sometimes it's hard to get them to relax. But I've kind of figured out what I try and do is sort of get them to think of something really happy and laugh and smile, and then as they relax the smile, take the photo, so they're not looking really grim. I've got all these little tricks. And with children, so I've done quite a few children. I've got a little camel that I had when I was a wooden camel, not a real camel, that I had when I was a child, and I will get the camel and get the child to sit on the camel, so they think they're sitting on having a camel ride, and then they look at the camera, and because trying to get the right photo of a child's not that easy, so you distract them with the camel and then snap the photo.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started doing portraits, the first thing I started doing was pet portraits. So I was painting dogs. Dogs and horses. And one of the things with the dogs, I had all these different things to make noises, like a whistle and a bell and I don't know. Michael had his saxophone, and so because the dog would kind of so you have to liven the look up of the dog by making some sort of funny noise. So I guess you just find little tricks and ways to get around things.
Yeah.
But that was a good way to start off, in a way, doing animal portraits, as a portrait painter, just to start sort of, and you're working with the owner of the dog as well. So that's sort of, you start getting used to dealing with people and, all of that as a way of feeding in. So
Yeah. And then what about pricing? If someone's just starting out, what do you recommend?
yeah. Well, I do it by square centimetre. So, but how I figured out my pricing was I looked at other artists who had really similar work and looked at their pricing. And then I kind of worked my pricing out, in between this one and this one that I thought had similar work and were at a similar level. So I kind of compared with other artists and worked off them, and then figured out what that was per square centimetre. And then I've, written that down somewhere. And then for still life, I've got a different price per square centimetre, because I tend to spend a lot more time on portrait commissions, months, whereas life's are weeks. So there's sort of different pricing for each thing. Yeah.
Mm.
I'm not sure if everybody does that, but that's sort of how I've sort of worked it out. I don't know if that's right, but it seems to be working. So,
Well, yeah, I think
uh,
definitely, comparing it to similar works, especially, if you're starting out, definitely looking at what other people at your level are doing, right? Because if you're just starting out, you can't really charge the same amount as Vicky, of course, because I mean, you've been painting for a very long time, and of course,
yeah,
as the year goes on, that you start increasing prices, based on how much you've sold
yeah,
and with time and inflation, of course. Um, so of course, someone who's starting out definitely should be looking at other people in their
yes. And do you remember
range.
at Angel Academy, how yeah, and remember when we were at Angel Academy, that Maestro gave us sort of a bit of a talk about that and charging for your work and how you had to allow for tax and materials and,
Mhm.
you have to allow, I think did he say about a third for materials and a third for
Yeah.
tax? And then you've got to charge enough to live on as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also, asking for deposits. There are lots
Oh,
of little
I
things
do
in
that.
there. Yes.
Yeah, so I do get a 50% deposit. And I get the 50%. So I take the photos and then I do a little contract and then I get the 50% deposit before I start painting.
Mhm.
And the
Mhm.
contract says that the remaining 50% will be paid upon completion of the portrait. So you always get that remaining 50% before you let the portrait walk out the door. But that's quite important to get that deposit. You don't want to be working on a portrait and then someone changes their mind. And if
Yeah.
you've got that 50% deposit, they're going to come through with the rest of it. And then if somebody, for instance, it's never happened to me, but if someone does pull out, at least you've got something to cover your time because you're spending months on these things to
Yeah.
get them right. So you don't want to be
Yeah.
spending months and then not get paid.
Yes, it's very important. Because
Yeah.
especially, if the person decides, you know what, I'm gonna pull out, you have your 50% and that covered your materials and some of the time because,
Yeah.
like you were saying, these
And
take a
it's
while.
non-refundable. It's
Yes,
the first 50% is non-refundable. That's right. Yeah.
that's very important. Yes, because then,
Yeah.
imagine like someone hires you and then you didn't ask for a deposit and then they disappear and now you're stuck with a painting that you can't really sell because no one's going to buy a painting of a stranger. And also, you spent months on it and it's kind of painful and it's a painful lesson. So maybe save yourself the
Yeah.
lesson and charge a deposit.
Yeah, and have a contract.
Yes.
Just a simple contract. Mine's very simple, it's just a few words, but it just says, 50% deposit and remaining 50% upon completion of the portrait, and you get them to sign it and send it back to you and yeah,
That's
email
very
it back
important.
even these days. Yeah, it's very important because this is our living. We have to be
Mhm.
able to eat and pay bills. So, yeah, that's just protecting yourself
Yes.
because some people might, people can be fickle.
Mhm.
But if they've put a deposit on, they're definitely going to come through. They're definitely serious. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's the other part, the person who really wants it will have absolutely no problem, following your rules and saying, "Okay, yes, I will pay the
Oh,
50%."
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Um,
basically respecting yourself, isn't it?
it is. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, there's that, because especially when you're doing a portrait commission, you want to please the person that you're painting, but at the same time, you can't forget about yourself because they're hiring you and it's very easy to allow yourself to become a quote unquote people pleaser and forget that you exist and then when things don't turn out, unfortunately you have no one to blame but yourself, which is kind of depressing.
Yeah, so it's best to cover yourself so that those situations don't arise, I guess, and that's just about part of being a professional, isn't it?
Yes,
And you learn from
definitely.
other people's mistakes. Like that hasn't happened to me, but because I always do the whole contract thing and everything. So, yeah. And as long as I keep doing that, it won't happen because I won't start work until I get that first 50%.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Oh, that's very important to have that boundary. And then also,
yeah.
do you have any more advice for someone who's looking to become a full-time artist?
Mm. Well, I would say, um, don't dive in the deep end without a safety net. So, um, maybe transition into it. Um, so I would have like a part-time job or something as well at first, so that you've got money to pay your bills. You don't want to end up in debt or hungry or homeless. So you want to be able to keep the wolf from the door somehow. Have a bit of a part-time job, and then as your sales grow and you can ease out of that and more into your painting. But don't just go, right, I'm going to become a full-time painter and jump straight in, because it can take a while to get known and build up your clientele and find your galleries or find your ways of selling. So you need to have a safety net, and also put a certain amount away, at least I would say 30%. Save as well for the lean times, because there's probably going to be times where you're not getting commissions, where you're not having any sales. You've still got to get by. So you need to put money away as savings as well. So you have to be quite financially savvy, I suppose. Yeah, and if you can work at home, like I don't know. For me, I know people who rent studios. I would never rent a studio. For me, renting is just dead money. So I used to paint in my dining room, and then I did save up and get a room built. But if you can work at home or find a spare room where you can work, so that you're not paying double the rent, especially if you're just beginning, don't go into debt, because interest is just dead money. Rent's just dead money. Try and find ways to be frugal, I suppose, with your money, because it's not painting's not a regular income. It's either pouring or it's a drought, kind of.
Mm.
So you need to be prepared for both. So when it's pouring, make sure you put quite a bit of that aside, so that when the drought comes, you've got enough to rely on to keep you going. I think that's it's kind of important to understand that, and not just fritter everything away. Be quite careful about how you go about it, I suppose. Yeah. So it's not just painting, it's about being a business person. And you have to learn about that as well, don't we? That's been quite difficult for me. It wasn't really in my nature to be a business person, but I've tried to learn as much as I can about that side of things. And
Yeah.
also, I think having mentors is great. So, I've got a really good friend that I walk with, and she's been a great business advisor. And she runs a dolphin boat where they go out and take people swimming with wild dolphins.
Wow.
But she's got so many good business ideas, and she's just given me really good sound advice along the way. And you know, and I was talking to Tina Garrett came and visited me a couple of months
Oh,
ago, and she was telling us about her business. One of her clients who's helped her with advice about business, and he owns a funeral parlor and a florist and a venue for um, functions, and he's given her advice. Now, so your mentors don't have to be other painters giving you business advice. They can be business people giving you business advice, because you are running a business. Even though we're artists and, we're really creative, to be living off our work, we are running a business. So, learn about that as well, and find people, seek out other business people that can give you advice about that side of things, I think. And they don't have to be painters. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah, because, as artists, we definitely have to wear a lot of hats.
Mm,
The painter hat, the marketer hat, the business hat, the I guess the hat of the person who manages the money. And that's a
yeah,
lot of things to have to do. And in a lot of different, I guess you could call them like careers,
earring.
technically. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's good to talk to people who are in those careers to see what you can, gain from that knowledge that they're giving you. Like I
Yeah.
personally, I read a lot of books actually on marketing, and I read a lot of books on basically on all of those, business side things, because it's very hard. You oftentimes you go to these art schools and they don't really teach you the business side. I
No,
mean,
they're not there to teach us that, are they? They're there to
exactly,
teach us the skills, or the academic ones are there to teach us the skills. And then we
exactly.
have to learn. Yeah, we have to learn. And also, we all do it differently, don't we?
Hmm. Yeah.
We have different business models. Like a lot of people, their business model will be taking workshops, you know,
Mm.
traveling and doing workshops around the place. That's not my business model,
Mhm.
um, but it works really, really well for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a good
yeah.
point. Yeah. And that really brings it back to, working around, yourself in a way, right? It's like I prefer to spend my time at home. Therefore, I will make sure that I supplement my income in a way that allows me the time to work at home, right? So that could be like you're doing commissions, or that could be, working with a local gallery, that could be, whatever might, work for you in that way. Could even be like online Zoom classes if you want to teach online Zoom classes. Like there are
Well,
lots of
that's right. A lot of people teach online. That's right. And
yeah.
in fact, I just did made a video with Streamline, a portrait
Yes.
video.
I wanted to
So
ask you
that
about
when
that.
people ask me, yeah, because people often say, "Do you teach? Do you teach?" And I say, "Well," and now I can say, "Well, actually, I've just made a portrait instruction video, and it does set out my whole method, and it's over a 5-day period." So, going right through the grisaille to the underpainting, to the grisaille, to the first color layer, second color layer. It goes right through the whole thing. Um, and so that to me is almost better than a workshop, because usually workshops don't go for 5 days. And it, yeah. And also you can rewind and watch it again and practice along and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So, in a way that I'm not doing workshops everywhere, but now I've got the video that can kind of take that spot, which is nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And another benefit is, oftentimes when you go to a workshop, everyone crowds around, the teacher, and not everyone can really see what, the teacher is doing, right? So it's really great in a video that you can actually see every single part without, having to clamor over other people
Yeah.
to try to, what is he doing, or what is she doing?
Yeah.
Which is it's really great. And also, yeah, I do like the rewinding aspect, because the way I didn't catch that, or like, oh, I have to, what color did they get?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Or even if you're down the track, you wanna go back and rewatch, certain sections again to refresh your memory. I find videos, actually, I've learned a lot from videos.
Mhm.
I had, watched quite a lot of them, and, so I think it's a good way to learn, especially when you're in Australia. And
Yeah.
everywhere's so far, all the teachers that I want to learn from are so far away, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, I was gonna
Australia.
say
Yeah.
that, for you, it's definitely a lot harder to just, go to Europe every, I don't know, summer to teach a workshop, because, it takes
Yeah.
a lot of first money and time, to get there. And then you have to
Yeah.
adjust to the time change, which is a whole 10 hours. So
Yeah.
it could be a lot compared to someone, who's maybe going from the States to Europe, which is not so crazy
7
and
hours or
a
something.
lot less
Yeah.
expensive. Yeah,
Much. Yeah, I'm sure. And now the flight is just, it's pretty hard to
it
get
is.
Yeah, it's a long way. Even the flight to America is a very long way for me.
It is, yeah. Oh my god, yeah. I mean, you would probably enter through, like, California, but still, it's still quite a long way to.
Well, I flew when I went to make the video, I went to Austin, but I went to Dallas,
Mm,
and then I had another 1-hour flight to Austin, but I
mhm.
had to wait 5 hours for that flight, and then the flight was delayed. So
No.
I'd flown from Australia, and then it was delayed and delayed and delayed, and then
Mhm.
they loaded all our luggage on it, and then they canceled it,
No.
and then I was like, "Oh, no," and then they made us run to all the gates. And so I ended up at Eric Rhodes's house, and it's 2 in the morning, and I was sort of delirious by then, and
Of
I just thought I
course.
probably should get a hotel, but my brain was just, like, fried from just being awake for so long, and I just couldn't even think about how to get a hotel. I just had the address, and I thought I'll just get a taxi and get there. But that was really lovely because 'cause they'd left the lights on and everything
Oh,
was cool and the aircon was on and it was really comfortable, but, yeah, it was a really long way. That last hour to Austin was really the
yeah.
longest part.
Oh, yeah, that's an
Yeah.
odyssey right there. That's insane. So yes, I can see why you would prefer to, teach from home, and not travel too much because it really takes it out of you. So yeah. Um, and then where can people find your painting realistic portraits video?
Well, I've got a page on my website, which is a FASO website, which I really am happy with. So I made a special page just for the instruction video where they can read a little bit and click straight through to the page to buy video. So yeah, it's all there, and my all my social media links are on the video on the website, and my website is just www.vicki, VICKI, Sullivan.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much, Vicky, for, being a guest on the show and providing so much wonderful advice.
Oh, thank you for having me, Laura. It's such an honor to be asked and so lovely to catch up with you again. And hopefully
Yeah.
I gave some people some ideas of, things that they can try and hopefully it'll work for them. And happy painting, everybody.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you.